Well, debate over welfare payments has raged this week, with the government having to defend changes affecting single parents. Families Minister Jenny Macklin angered welfare groups when she said she could live on Newstart payments of $246 a week.
Well, today there are reports the Federal Coalition is considering a temporary increase to the Newstart Allowance, provided funds are also put into training to get people back into jobs. Well, for more on this and some of the other top stories of the week, I'm joined now by Crikey.com's Canberra correspondent Bernard Keane and economics correspondent with the Australian newspaper Adam Creighton. Thank you both very much for joining us. Bernard, if I can start with you. We've seen the gimmicks, we've seen people saying they can't live on Newstart. Do you think it's time now for a national debate on whether Newstart should be increased or whether changes need to be made to the welfare system?
Oh, we've been having a debate over the level of Newstart for quite some time. I mean, there's an interesting array of figures right across the ideological spectrum that suggests that it should be raised. The debate itself has been pretty poor quality because I'm not sure that we're clear about exactly what we're trying to target here. There was an excellent paper by Andrew Baker of the Centre for Independent Studies in Fairfax back in August, which made some really good points on this issue. The only sort of argument that I think there's actually advanced the debate, he pointed out that a lot of Newstart recipients are actually are on there for less than 3 months. So in effect, a significant increase in Newstart allowance is really just a windfall for them. And that if there is a strong case for increasing Newstart, it's for the long-term unemployed. And in that case, that should be coupled with mutual obligation measures or additional measures to kind of increase the chance of getting them back into the workforce. And that seems to me to be a much more sensible approach to all this. And ultimately, this is about addressing poverty. And if we're going to spend money addressing poverty, and of course the price tag for increasing Newstart is in the billions of dollars, then there are other areas that are either equally meritorious of targeting here or more meritorious, like disability carer recipients or parenting payment recipients. So if we're talking more broadly about poverty, perhaps we're going to get more bang for our buck targeting other areas as well as long-term unemployed who are struggling on what is a quite low level by everyone's agreement, quite a low level of Newstart payments.
But does that set up a further question? Because I think there's also some confusion around exactly how the system does work, because people may not necessarily just be receiving Newstart, they may also in fact be receiving other forms of support and what have you. So it's really kind of difficult to get a handle on exactly what people are receiving and what they're not.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. I mean, the fact is, if you are on the Newstart allowance, you're probably also on rent assistance as well. And then, and I mean, the whole point of the payment, it's not meant to be a payment that you live on. I mean, it's meant to be a temporary payment in between jobs. And just as Bernard says, 3/4 of people are only on it for less than 3 months. And so I think it's reasonably adequate. Although, I mean, it is worth pointing out that it's going to have to be increased at some point because it's only indexed to the rate of inflation as opposed to the rate of wages. And so its relative rate is obviously dwindling over time. So at some point there is going to have to be like a ratchet effect that's going to have to be increased. But I mean, I think the broad quantum of it I think is fine. Basically, it seems to work well.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between helping someone who is unemployed and also to get them back into the jobs market. But then it's also, you don't want to have it too much so that then it would discourage people from actually seeking employment.
Yeah. And certainly if you look where the long-term recipients live, it's all in the coastal areas of Queensland and New South Wales, quite attractive locations. And so, there are people who do choose to live on it, and they generally live with other people who are also on it. You can see that very clearly in the data. And so, I mean, I don't think that those sorts of people should be rewarded. I mean, they clearly choose not to work. And if you increase it, then you're just kind of increasing it for those people as well.
But it's also about, I think, the shift for single parents onto Newstart. That's caused a lot of controversy with around these sorts of payments. Is that an issue? Is this the right way to go about handling issues affecting single parents?
Again, it comes back to what are we trying to do here? And the focus on Newstart, I think, has taken the focus away from the broader focus on how do we alleviate poverty and how do we measure poverty. Interesting paper from ACOS a couple of months ago, which used the traditional mechanism of considering poverty, which is a certain level, a certain proportion of median income. But ACOS has also tried to explore what do we actually mean by poverty, what is absolute poverty, what is relative poverty, It's going to vary depending on the sort of societies we have in Australia. What do we mean by poverty? That gives us a very different perspective on that. That sort of data suggests that yes, Newstart recipients are overrepresented in terms of poor households, but there are other groups as well. For example, age pension recipients who don't own their own home are strongly overrepresented. But again, people on disability, carer pension, which I've already mentioned, and parenting payments as well. So I think we need to take a step back from the focus on Newstart and say, well, if we want to maximise the impact on poverty, which areas do we actually target? Which areas do we deem as a society to be most deserving of taxpayer assistance? Because, as I said earlier, these things all come with a lot of zeros on them. I mean, this is a lot of money, and given the current fiscal circumstances we're facing, there's no lazy $1 billion lying around to be using without sort of too much analysis.
But you also have the point where someone who might be on a disability pension, because it's more than Newstart, they might be discouraged from trying to find work, because if they find work and then perhaps lose their job, they then go back onto Newstart, which is less. I've heard of cases about that sort of situation. So it just seems to be that there's different amounts for different people, and it's very hard to try and bring it all together and to encourage people back to work. Is there enough to live on? It just seems to be a very confused issue.
I think the government in the last 18 months, I think, has actually done some good work in tightening access to the disability pension. There was this great Australian tradition of moving from long-term unemployment onto the disability pension. Now, simply because the disability pension has been higher, the government's actually been very good at tightening up access to that, making the disability pension a genuine disability pension, which it hasn't been ever since the Hawke government introduced it back in the 1980s. It's always been this problem of people moving onto the disability pension as a kind of a de facto permanent payment because they simply can't find work or are unwilling to find work. So that issue is slowly being addressed. But yeah, it comes back to the problem of how do you walk the line between ensuring people don't slip through the cracks, but also maximising the incentive for them to get back into the workforce, and of course then you get the issue of marginal tax rates as well if they get back into the workforce via part-time work.